So my name's John. I'm going to geek out on y'all for a little bit. When people used to ask me what it was that I do, I would describe it as this ridiculously convoluted list of disciplines. But nowadays, when people ask me what it is that I do, I tell them that I design the future, which I know sounds super obnoxious. But let me try and make this, sound a little less ridiculous. I found my way through working on digital products and experiences through an unusual route that started in the world of fiction. I used to lead a creative studio called Perception that designed all kinds of fictional technologies that you would see in science fiction films, superhero movies, and I loved just that whole world of creating these visions of what technology would be like in the future, but also having this kind of almost like blue sky environment of fiction to explore almost anything that you could imagine. My work in this space started, the very first project that I had worked on was creating some of the gadgets for Tony Stark in Iron Man 2. And I found this space super stimulating. It was really fascinating to me to think about my end user of Tony Stark and what they would need, but then start finding this friction between, is Tony Stark the end user, or is the person sitting in the last row of the movie theater the end user? I mean, at the end of the day, these are still effectively just like a visual effect that you're seeing in these films. But pretty quickly, I found that real-world brands started approaching my team and I and asking if we could help them bridge the gap between their current products and these very ambitious visions of technology that we had seen in fiction. I found this super stimulating, and it was really fascinating to me to work with these very different kinds of brands on projects that had completely different constraints and challenges associated with them. And it's easy to find some similarities, and there's even this sort of, precedent for science fiction informing science fact, but I also loved figuring out what the differences were between these worlds. And so I'd go back and forth between working on a film and then work on a real-world product, and then go back to film, but maybe the tech in the film would start to be a little more grounded or have a little more real-world UX running through its veins. And even the work in film that I was doing started getting into other spaces like title sequences and even designing and directing the Marvel Studios logo that plays before every one of their films. And I'd take that cinematic mindset and start bringing it back into real-world products and finding ways to make them especially cinematic. I had created the operating system for the electric Hummer. And when you're working on something like this and a product like this, I mean, this car is like ridiculously cinematic. It's like the Michael Bay of vehicles, for better or worse. But when you're designing for something like this, you also have to bring this unbelievably rigorous mindset to creating for a vehicle. I mean, the worst case scenario for your end user in a car is unbelievably bad. So there's this certain standard that you have to hold yourself to when you're thinking about this. And so at this point in my career, I was finding this, really nice rhythm going back and forth between these two worlds and seeing them overlap more and more. And I also felt that this recent time that we're in right now was a really critical time. It feels like for the first time ever that reality is catching up to, and in some cases surpassing science fiction. And so 25 months ago, I founded my own practice called BlackBox Infinite to help innovators with all sorts of problems that sometimes don't have existing best practices or templates for success. And so at BlackBox, we work on everything from vehicles, not that different from my past work, but looking at ways that we can try to create in-car experiences that are unusually safe, unusually easy to use, and leveraging new tools like Rive to take our Figma designs and prototype them to see if a new kind of HVAC control can be manipulated while your hands are full and the kids are in the back seat screaming and whatnot. At BlackBox, we've been doing a lot of work in the collision between AI, tech, and sports, and all of the amazing sensors and technologies that are making all sorts of new things possible there. We get into all sorts of really weird and unusual projects, like creating the digital face for one of the leaders in humanoid robotics. It's sort of like the ultimate AI agent, and for us is this incredible balance between something that doesn't have a rule book associated with it yet. It certainly has a science fiction feeling to it, but it also has some really insane human factors and safety concerns around a product like this. So that's what I mean when I tell people that what I do is that I design the future. So what do we really know about the future? If you were to stop someone on the street and ask them what the future will be like, there's a very good chance that the first thing that will come to their mind is some sort of vision from science fiction. And for me, when I was a kid, I was deeply inspired by science fiction. There were all these different things that I saw that blew my mind and got me really excited about the future that we could be living in one day. And I loved seeing how prescient some of these ideas became. I mean, in 1968, Stanley Kubrick nailed FaceTiming with your kids while you're on a business trip. Like, this is it exactly, like what we have today. And we've seen things like Motorola engineers take tremendous inspiration from the Star Trek communicator. We've seen visions of advanced prosthetics. And then even in, the more recent generations of science fiction, it's not quite the same as what I grew up with. We see a lot of visions of the future that can feel very oppressive. We see visions of the future that are gritty and grimy. We see visions of the future that depict robots that look like they have substance abuse problems. And in my little specific corner of the world, I love seeing the tech in these films. There's amazing artists in many different places who are creating all of these incredible holographic displays and beautiful topographic maps and charts of the galaxy and arrays of glowing Spider-Man suits. But I also start to think, all right, well, if I was using this to try to understand what technology will be like in the future, it's pretty clear. The tech in the future is going to be just a bunch of glowing blue shit. So it's important to take a moment to remind ourselves that the future, it's not an aesthetic. The future is not a vibe. The future is not set dressing. And I love me a cool sci-fi hallway, but the future isn't just a font. And don't find me somewhere at config and ask me to go on a rant on why do every small town police department have on the side of their cars the word police written in a typeface that's from the Michael Bay font kit. It drives me crazy. So many years back, before starting BlackBox, my team and I at Perception had an opportunity to work on a film that had a rare vision of a positive future. That film was Marvel Studios' Black Panther, which was this amazing opportunity that spawned just from a simple brief. The team at Marvel came to us and said, in this film, Black Panther, there's this fictional world called Wakanda, and Wakanda must have the most advanced technology that has ever been seen in a movie before. I immediately was so stoked to hear that. We jumped in and we started playing around with these concepts, and we eventually landed at this idea of vibranium sand, this physical material that would be actuated by ultrasonic sound waves and form different shapes and sculptures that the characters could interact with. It was part of the way that Black Panther's superhero suit would activate. It was a presentation tool. It was a communications device. It even was an opening sequence to the film that told the history of the culture and a closing title sequence that played at the end of the film. Set to a song that Kendrick Lamar had made for this title sequence. We use Kendrick Lamar's bass frequencies to even control the way that the sound would pulsate and undulate throughout this sequence. This project was one of the most wild and ambitious collaborations that I had had out of many with the team at Marvel Studios. And it always stuck with me that this project resonated really well with all of our stakeholders because it wasn't just this mindset that started with cool artwork or visual effects tests or concept art or initial designs. It started with a lot of discussions around real-world scientific principles and things like the way you can use sound frequencies to create geometric patterns known as cymatics, or even the way that ultrasonic sound waves can actually levitate and control the position in 3D space of lightweight styrofoam particles, some amazing tests that the University of Tokyo were doing with ultrasonic transducers. And it got us to this point where our conversation started with these sort of ideas, and that made it that much easier for us to pitch to them. There's this wild vibranium sand that can hover in the air, and it resonated with our stakeholders because they understood the science that was driving all of it. They understood that it wasn't just, wouldn't it be cool if ... but that there was this almost engineering mindset that was built into these concepts. And so it stuck with me that when you have the opportunity to design a positive future, one of the ways that you can do that is through defining for yourself an engineered logic that can drive these ideas and create almost a framework for them. When you're designing a positive future, you can also look at some of the current forces in the world and certainly look at some of the positive forces in the world. I know it's hard to imagine sometimes, but there are a lot of wonderful positive trends in the world. Globally, we have as a culture, as a collective community, more empathy than we've ever had. There's less extreme poverty in the world. There's constant improvements in global literacy and the use of renewable energy. And so it's important to look at some of these positive forces and start to extrapolate those forward into the future. It's also important that when you're designing a positive future, you're not just designing products or experiences or worlds for the main characters, but you should be considering, what does any of this do for the elderly? What happens to the children in this world, in this future? Where are the pets? What other kinds of community can we tie in? And think of even communities like this here that are all together here today. So if you find yourself with the opportunity to design a positive future, it's almost table stakes that you have to make it beautiful. You have to make it interesting. It should be inspiring. But whatever you do, make sure that you start by making it as meaningful as you can. So the last thing that I want to share with you is a really exciting moment that we had at BlackBox at the start of last year. Just as the Apple Vision Pro was being released, we saw it as this ultimate moment in the timeline where it really did feel like a particularly mainstream brand and a mainstream technology was taking this huge leap forward towards and even beyond science fiction. And I still, to this day, think this headset is a magical piece of tech. I mean, you put this thing on, and you could hallucinate anything that you could imagine. But we were also a little disappointed that all of the early use cases that we had saw were using this $3,500 magical machine to just look at lots of rounded rectangles floating in space around you. So at BlackBox, we decided to throw our hat into the ring, and we had this idea for what it would be like to view a Formula One race within the Apple Vision Pro. For us, it was just a very practical way of putting together something that felt like Iron Man tech, but was equal parts Iron Man and this rug, right? And had this sense of joy to it. And if you're anything like me, if you ever are designing, and in the process of design, you start making sound effects while you're designing, your design's going to be amazing. Like, you just know, like, all right, this is it. I'm having so much fun. I am in the zone. This is going down the right path. So we put together this prototype for what we thought this experience would be like. This prototype was built just using visual effects and animation techniques, but the important thing is that it was built around some very specific constraints. It had this pathway to plausibility because we knew that we certainly have access to three-dimensional geographic data. Like, I'm absolutely obsessed with digital cartography. There's been real-time telemetry in Formula One for generations, and something like this actually solves some valid problems for fans of motorsport who typically are constrained to only seeing whatever number of cars can fit within the 4K television screen and don't understand what's happening across the geography of a 4-mile-long racetrack. So we put this out there into the world, and we were thrilled that it got a wonderful response. It went super viral, and we got all these notes and comments from people that were talking about how it was evoking feelings from their childhood, and it just got me continually thinking about that rug and the toy cars and just how natural and how baked into our human experience something like this already is. We're also really excited because we saw multiple different teams of developers who started creating their own mock-ups and prototypes of this exact concept. There was one of these concepts that was put together by a team that made a particularly compelling version of it. And so we connected with this team. They had created this experience called Laps. We partnered with them and have been helping them with the future roadmap and continued development of this experience. And for me to see this concept, this idea, now be this fully functioning product, it's not publicly available, but it is an incredibly robust beta experience. And you jump into this, and as a motorsports fan, it's transcendent. I mean, it completely changes the way that you think about how you interpret and experience a sport like this. So even though this is a private beta at the moment, it's developed a cult following. We're really thrilled to see it developing this traction, and that it, again, for me, just reinforces this idea that these magical visions of science fiction, they can be a little bit Iron Man, but at times they also feel just obvious. Like, it feels like, of course this is the way it should be. Like, of course, if I look at the Las Vegas racetrack and I get really close to the Las Vegas sphere and I look into it, I could see the seating chart inside of the Vegas sphere. Of course, if there's weather conditions that could impact the race, I should just look up at the ceiling and see National Weather Service data. And so there's times where I cringe at concepts like the metaverse, but I think about digital cartography and experiences like this that combine all of these different data sources and just put them into something that relates them to the world around us. And I start to think, yeah, all right, like this is the metaverse. Like, this is where we're headed. So I want to just shift a little bit from the future to today. Where we are on the timeline is a special time. Most of us have lived through some very high impact technologies that have arrived into the world and changed the ways that we live our lives. And it's becoming very clear that we're at the beginning of another wave of technologies that could be huge, that could be enormous, and could be exceptionally disruptive. The only thing that I can say with certainty about the future is that when we look back on today, we will say, back then, back in 2025, that was the time. That was where all of the opportunity was. The clay was still soft. The best practices had not yet been written. It was all fair game. And today also means like today, like Wednesday, like we're here at day one of Config, and it's the perfect place for us to be together. And so I encourage everybody, while you're here, this is my first time at Config, I'm like, my mind is blown by the scale and scope of this event. It's absolutely incredible to me. While you're here, absorb as much as you can. Learn as many new things as you can, visit as many sessions as you can, meet as many new people as you can, have as many conversations as possible. And then when you return to your world and to your work, do your best to design a positive future. Thank you.